Caleb Moore, a 19-year-old teenager, stood in the courtroom with an unreadable expression. To the judge, the prosecutor, and the spectators, he was just another troubled teen, a case easily written off. But as he calmly requested to represent himself, the room fell into uneasy silence. This wasn't the young man they thought they knew. With years of legal study under his belt, Caleb was about to turn the entire case upside down. What no one expected was that this quiet, unassuming teenager would become the one to shake the foundations of the courtroom itself. He shifted slightly, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. The weight of the room seemed to hang in the air, oppressive and thick. The polished marble floors and high, wooden beams of the courthouse felt cold, almost distant, as if they were witnesses to all the cases that had come before this one. Outside the tall windows, the late autumn sun streamed through, casting long, thin shadows across the courtroom floor. But the daylight couldn't warm the chill of judgment that gripped the room. The murmurs of the spectators filled the space, like ripples in water, hesitant and uncertain. Caleb's presence in the room was strange, unsettling. To the court, to the onlookers, he was nothing more than just another troubled teenager, someone who didn't belong in a place like this. His dark hoodie, worn jeans, and the fresh trace of uncertainty in his gaze painted a picture of someone who was about to be swallowed by the system. But the truth was far from that. He was far from that. Judge Mark Grayson glanced over at Caleb, his eyes narrowed, skeptical. A seasoned judge, Grayson had seen countless cases, and every inch of his demeanor told Caleb exactly what he thought. "You're just a kid, and this is bigger than you." With a slight sneer, Grayson adjusted his glasses, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You think you're some kind of legal expert, kid?" Grayson asked, his tone dripping with mockery. He leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming lazily against the polished wood of his desk. "This isn't a debate club. You're in a courtroom." Caleb's heart pounded in his chest, but his expression didn't change. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. The laughter that rippled through the room didn't faze him. Instead, Caleb straightened his back and stepped forward, his voice steady, each word deliberately measured. He had spent years studying the law with his grandmother, Ruth. She had taught him that justice wasn't just a word, it was a weapon. And now, it was his turn to wield it. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor," Caleb said, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had spent countless nights studying court cases, legal procedures, and loopholes, even when no one else believed he could. He wasn't just any teenager standing before the court. He was a young man who had mastered the law in ways that no one in this room had bothered to notice. Not yet. The courtroom went silent. The prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, raised an eyebrow, a look of amusement crossing his face. "This should be interesting," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His gaze flicked from Caleb to the judge, who seemed momentarily taken aback by Caleb's audacity. Caleb turned, his gaze sweeping across the room. He caught the eyes of the bailiff, the stenographer, and the courtroom staff, who all seemed to be caught between disbelief and mild curiosity. No one expected this. No one, except Caleb. The judge's face twisted in a half-smile, almost as if he had heard a joke that didn't land. He leaned forward, his hands steepled in front of him, and spoke again, this time with a touch more sarcasm in his voice. "All right, kid, let's see what you've got," Grayson said, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. The way he said it, with that glint of superiority, only strengthened Caleb's resolve. Caleb didn't respond immediately. He remained standing, silently. The tension in the air seemed to stretch, the seconds turning into what felt like an eternity. His fingers flexed slightly, adjusting the cuffs of his sleeves, and his eyes never left the judge. He was calm, too calm for anyone's liking. As the prosecutor prepared to move forward, Caleb raised a hand, interrupting the flow of the case. "Before we continue, Your Honor," he said, his voice cutting through the silence, "I'd like to ask a question." The room quieted even further. Carrington blinked, momentarily thrown off. "Go ahead, kid," he sneered, but there was something in his voice that betrayed a hint of uncertainty. Caleb took a deep breath, his mind already working. He wasn't going to be dismissed this easily. "You're saying my fingerprints were on the steering wheel of the stolen car, right?" He turned slowly toward the prosecutor, who stood across from him, arms folded and ready to shoot down any argument Caleb might present. But Caleb wasn't done. He met Carrington's eyes, his expression unchanged, and spoke again, his voice steady but piercing. "But what if I wasn't the one in that car?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. The courtroom fell silent, the weight of Caleb's question pressing down on everyone in the room. For the first time, the prosecutor's confident demeanor faltered. All eyes turned to Grayson, who paused, a deep frown settling on his face. He wasn't used to being questioned in such a way, especially not by a defendant. And yet, here was Caleb, unshaken, unafraid, already beginning to dismantle the case that was supposed to be so straightforward. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with anticipation. Everyone waited. No one spoke. And in that silence, Caleb knew the battle was just beginning. Caleb takes a step forward, asking the judge for permission to challenge the evidence. What follows is a masterful demonstration of his knowledge of the law, shaking the prosecutor's confidence. The room falls quiet again as Caleb rises from his seat, his posture straight and purposeful. All eyes are on him, waiting to see what he will do next. He clears his throat, glancing at Judge Grayson, who watches him with a mix of amusement and disdain. The prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, shifts uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes flicking between Caleb and the judge. "Your Honor," Caleb begins, his voice calm and controlled, "I move to challenge the evidence presented by the prosecution. I'd like to request verification of the chain of custody of the fingerprints they claim were found in the stolen vehicle." The room reacts with an audible shift. Whispers ripple through the crowd. Caleb's request is audacious, and everyone can feel it. The judge raises an eyebrow, clearly unaccustomed to such directness from a defendant. Carrington's confident posture falters slightly as Caleb's words cut through the air. Judge Grayson leans forward, eyeing Caleb with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Moore?" Caleb stands tall, his gaze unwavering. "I'm suggesting that the prosecution's evidence is incomplete and possibly flawed, Your Honor. If the officer who reported finding my fingerprints was not where he claimed to be at the time, his testimony is rendered invalid." There's a sharp intake of breath in the room. Carrington's smirk slips as Caleb's words land with precision. The prosecutor looks over at the judge, trying to regain his composure. "Your Honor, this is preposterous. The evidence is clear, and we've established the chain of custody. But Caleb isn't finished." "I'm asking for the officer's GPS logs from the night in question," Caleb states, his voice steady, each word deliberate. "If the officer was where he said he was, the GPS logs will prove it. If not, we have a serious issue with the integrity of the evidence." The silence in the courtroom thickens. The jury shifts uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the change in momentum. The tension is palpable, and for the first time in this trial, the prosecutor's confident demeanor begins to crack. His eyes dart to the judge, then back to Caleb. This wasn't part of his plan. Caleb has forced his hand. Caleb's questioning continues with methodical precision. "The prosecution has failed to provide the full context of the evidence, and I'm requesting that we examine it in full. The truth isn't just about what you can prove. It's about what you can't hide." Judge Grayson looks over at Carrington, the skepticism now clearly etched on his face. "Is there an issue with verifying these GPS logs, Counselor?" Grayson's voice is even, but there's a subtle sharpness to it, a signal that he's beginning to question the integrity of the case as a whole. Carrington hesitates. It's brief, a moment too long, but it's enough. The room holds its breath. His eyes flicker between Caleb and the judge, and for the first time, the prosecutor isn't sure what to say. He had assumed victory was a given. He had not expected Caleb to fight back with such skill. "Your Honor," Carrington begins, but his voice is less sure than before. "This evidence is valid. The logs are irrelevant." Caleb cuts him off, his voice sharp but calm. "If the officer was where he says he was, then verifying the GPS logs should be no problem. But if he wasn't, then the entire foundation of this case is built on assumptions." The room holds its breath. Judge Grayson taps his gavel lightly, breaking the silence but not the tension. "We will adjourn for a moment while I consider this request," he says, his voice devoid of the casual confidence it had held earlier. The gavel strikes the wooden surface, echoing in the room. As the courtroom empties for the brief recess, Caleb stands firm, his eyes never leaving the judge. He knows this could be the turning point, the moment that could change everything. Caleb drops the final piece of the puzzle. The owner of the stolen car was a key witness who wasn't included in the prosecution's evidence. The courtroom gasps as Caleb presents a statement that could change everything. The silence that follows is thick, heavy with the weight of Caleb's revelation. He steps forward, his voice calm but powerful, breaking the tension. Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence the statement from the vehicle's owner, Mr. Raymond Whitaker. Caleb holds up a piece of paper, his fingers steady as he presents the document. The room's attention shifts to him, the murmurs from the spectators dying down to a soft hum. Even the judge's posture straightens slightly, as if unsure of what to expect next. Judge Grayson's eyes narrow as Caleb reads aloud from the statement. I left my car running when I went inside the gas station, Caleb recites, his voice crisp and clear. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off, but it wasn't the guy you arrested. I saw the kid, and he was white. The words land with a punch. The air in the room seems to thicken, and for a moment, time feels suspended. Caleb lets the statement hang in the silence, watching the faces in the courtroom shift from disbelief to a mounting realization. The jury exchanges glances, the tension in the room suddenly palpable. Mitchell Carrington's face falls. His confident stance from earlier is replaced by an uneasy shift in his chair. He opens his mouth to object, but the words catch in his throat. He's rattled, caught completely off guard by this new evidence. His mind races, trying to reconcile the case he thought he had already won with this unexpected twist. Grayson leans forward, his fingers tapping lightly on the edge of his desk. Mr. Moore, he begins, his voice steady, but with an edge of suspicion. Are you saying that the prosecution intentionally withheld this statement from the court? Caleb nods, his gaze unwavering. Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution chose to ignore this vital piece of evidence. The car's owner clearly states that a different person stole the vehicle. The defendant, me, was not involved in the theft, and the case presented against me is based on faulty assumptions. The judge's frown deepens. The prosecutor, now visibly unsettled, shakes his head, trying to find a way to salvage the case. This is irrelevant, Your Honor, Carrington stammers. The defendant was found in possession of the vehicle and the fingerprints. But Caleb interrupts him, his calm cutting through Carrington's defense like a knife. You're asking us to ignore the truth, to ignore what the car's owner said. The truth isn't just about what you want to prove. It's about the facts that you've conveniently overlooked. The room is quiet now. The jury, once skeptical, is now paying full attention, hanging on Caleb's every word. The courtroom, once filled with doubt and dismissal, is now a place of tense anticipation. Caleb has taken control of the narrative. Judge Grayson, who had initially dismissed Caleb as nothing more than a kid in over his head, now regards him with a look of quiet contemplation. His hand rests on his chin, his mind clearly racing through the implications of the new evidence. The prosecutor's confidence continues to falter, his voice losing its earlier conviction. Your Honor, this is simply... Grayson raises his hand, cutting Carrington off. I've heard enough, he says, his voice final. He turns to Caleb. You've made your point, Mr. Moore. The prosecution's case is now in question. But do you have anything else to support your claims? The room holds its breath as Caleb stands tall, ready for his final argument. The tension is almost unbearable, and for the first time in this trial, it is Caleb, not the prosecution, who has the upper hand. Caleb glances at the jury, his mind working quickly, but his composure never wavers. This was the moment he had prepared for. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The truth was out, but Caleb knew the fight wasn't over yet. He still had one final move to make. The courtroom falls into a tense silence as Judge Grayson rises, his gavel poised in the air, ready to deliver a decision that will change Caleb's life forever. The room is still, every breath seemingly held in unison, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone in attendance. Caleb stands motionless, his eyes fixed on the judge, his face an unreadable mask. The sunlight from the windows is now dimming as the late afternoon hours wear on, casting long shadows across the room. The golden light of the day gives way to a grayness that mirrors the uncertainty hanging in the air. For a moment, it feels as if the world has stopped moving, and Caleb's heart beats loudly in his chest, matching the pounding rhythm in his ears. But on the outside, he remains still, composed, calm. His nerves, tight as they may be, don't show. He has done everything he could. He has fought for the truth, for the justice that had eluded him for so long, and now, standing on the precipice of victory, he has no more tricks to play. Judge Grayson looks down at the case file in front of him, his brow furrowed in thought. The gavel hovers above the wood, a symbol of the final decision that will shape Caleb's future. Mitchell Carrington, who had once been so sure of a swift conviction, stands beside his table, nervously tapping his pen against the edge. His earlier confidence has crumbled under the weight of Caleb's defense. The evidence, or lack thereof, is undeniable, and the prosecutor knows it. "Mr. Carrington," Grayson's voice breaks through the silence, low and commanding. "Do you have anything further to add?" Carrington shifts, his face flushed with frustration and panic. He opens his mouth, but no words come out at first. His eyes flick to Caleb, who stands quietly, his arms crossed in front of him, exuding a calm that seems almost otherworldly. The prosecutor clears his throat. "Your Honor, I believe the evidence presented is sufficient," but his words trail off, as if even he doesn't believe them anymore. He shifts uncomfortably under the judge's stare, the weight of the new evidence Caleb introduced hanging over him like a shadow. There was no GPS data, no corroboration for the officer's testimony, and Caleb's revelation of the car's owner's statement had completely shattered the foundation of Carrington's argument. Judge Grayson raises his gavel and taps it once, then twice, his eyes meeting Caleb's for a moment. The air thickens once again as the judge leans forward, his voice even but carrying a weight of finality. "The evidence has been presented, and the court has reviewed the facts. Based on what has been revealed, I find that there is reasonable doubt in this case." The sound of the gavel striking the wood seems to echo in Caleb's chest, his heart racing with the force of it. The words sink in, and for a moment he can hardly believe them. The case is dismissed. The verdict that he had fought for, the justice he had sought, is finally within his grasp. The courtroom erupts in murmurs of disbelief, the quiet whispers quickly growing into louder discussions as people shift in their seats, some in shock, others in relief. Caleb feels a quiet victory wash over him, though he knows that the real battle isn't over yet. His future, though uncertain, has taken a sharp turn toward the better. Grayson looks at Caleb, his gaze softened, perhaps with a hint of regret. He clears his throat, straightening up from his chair, his hand still gripping the gavel. "I've seen many cases in my years on the bench, Mr. Moore, but this one, it's made me question many things. But before we move on, there's one last matter to resolve." Caleb's breath catches in his chest. His mind races. What more could there be? He had done it. He had proven his innocence. But Grayson isn't finished yet. The judge pauses for a moment, the courtroom hanging on his every word. How can we be sure the truth hasn't been overlooked? Are there any final pieces of evidence, anything else that could change the course of this case? The words hang in the air, an unspoken challenge to Caleb. The silence in the room is deafening once again. Caleb holds the judge's gaze, his calm resolve unwavering. His mind races through the facts, the details he's already exposed. But this question, it's the last test. His victory is almost complete, but there's still one final hurdle to clear. ChatGPT said. Caleb steps forward one last time, his voice steady, his words sharp. "If the system can fail here, how many others have been wronged in silence?" The words echo in the quiet air, cutting through the tension that still lingers around the courthouse. Caleb's gaze sweeps across the gathered reporters, their pens poised and microphones extended. His family stands behind him, silent but present, watching him with pride and concern. The moment feels surreal. Everything he had fought for, everything he had worked toward, was about to be crystallized in this very statement. His words, though calm, carry the weight of the injustice he's exposed, not just for himself, but for the countless others who have been swept aside by a flawed system. The courtroom may have ruled in his favor, but outside these walls, the battle for justice continues. Caleb recalls his late-night study sessions with his grandmother, Ruth. She had always told him, "The law isn't about power, Caleb. It's about finding the truth, even when others want to ignore it." Her voice resonates in his mind now, as he stands on the steps of the courthouse, surrounded by reporters. He had always known that the truth would come to light, even if it was hidden beneath layers of corruption and oversight. Now, here it was, his truth, and the truth of many others who had been ignored. "Today, I'm not just here for myself," Caleb continues, his voice growing more confident with each word. "I'm here for everyone who's ever been overlooked, dismissed, or wrongfully convicted. This case, this victory, it's just the beginning of a much larger fight for justice." His eyes meet the camera lenses, and he pauses, allowing his words to sink in. Caleb's family watches from a distance, their expressions a mix of pride and apprehension. His mother, Denise, stands with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. It's been a long road for her, too. One filled with uncertainty and fear, but also with the hope that her son would rise above the challenges thrown at him. Behind Caleb, his grandmother's influence is still palpable. Ruth's unwavering belief in Caleb, in his potential to make a difference, has been his guiding force. Every step Caleb took, every challenge he faced, was shaped by her wisdom and guidance. Ruth may no longer be with him physically, but she has never been far from his thoughts, especially in moments like this. Her voice echoes, reminding him that the fight for justice never truly ends. It evolves, it grows, and it needs to be fought at every turn. As Caleb stands there, facing the crowd, something inside him shifts. The boy who had been unsure, who had stumbled through life with a sense of doubt, is gone. In his place is a young man, resolute and certain of his purpose. His journey has transformed him, not just into a victor, but into a symbol of resistance, a beacon for those who have been silenced. Caleb is no longer the defendant. He is the advocate, the one who will stand for others. The reporters surround him now, their questions coming fast and furious. Caleb answers each one with clarity, his words deliberate and direct. He talks about the flaws in the system, the gaps in the evidence, and how this case should serve as a wake-up call for everyone involved in the justice system. He's not just speaking for himself anymore. He's speaking for the voiceless, the forgotten, the ones who have never had the chance to defend themselves. Then, as the last reporter finishes their question, Caleb feels the familiar buzz of his phone in his pocket. He pulls it out and glances at the screen, the name of a legal firm flashing in bold letters. A quick glance at the message tells him all he needs to know. They're offering him an opportunity to join their team, to begin a new chapter in his life as a lawyer. For a moment, Caleb stands frozen. The weight of it all settles in, his life, his future, suddenly within his reach. The fight he started years ago, when he first began to study law with his grandmother, is no longer just a dream. It's happening. He smiles to himself, not just because of the opportunity, but because he knows this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. But as Caleb steps away from the cameras, his thoughts are interrupted by the ringing of his phone once more. This time, it's an offer. The next step in his journey, one that will take him into the heart of the legal world and into the fight for justice that will define his future. The question that remains is how far he is willing to go. Caleb stands at the threshold of a new chapter in his life, the weight of the past behind him, but the path ahead still uncertain. His journey has only just begun. The small law office in Georgia feels both unfamiliar and oddly comforting. The shelves are lined with thick volumes of legal texts, the scent of paper and ink filling the air. Caleb walks in slowly, his steps deliberate, taking in the space that will now be his. The quiet hum of the office, the soft rustle of pages, and the steady rhythm of the clock ticking on the wall make it feel like a place where future battles will unfold. For Caleb, this moment marks the beginning of his new reality. As he takes in the space, Caleb's mind drifts back to the early days of his journey, when he was just a teenager, unsure of what his future would hold. Now, standing here, he can see how far he's come. His grandmother, Ruth, had always told him that justice wasn't something you win once, it's a lifelong pursuit. That advice, simple yet profound, has guided him through every challenge he faced, from the moment he stepped into the courtroom to the battles he fought within himself. Justice is never easy, she had said, and it's never just about you, Caleb. It's about fighting for everyone who can't fight for themselves. He takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words. Caleb knows this is just the beginning. There will be many more challenges ahead, cases to fight, lives to change, injustices to confront. But he also knows that he's ready. He's no longer the naive teenager who stood in the courtroom, facing an uncertain future. He's grown, both personally and professionally. Caleb's office at law school is now filled with books, papers, and a growing sense of purpose. It's a far cry from the uncertainty of the past, but it feels right. This is where his journey will continue. This is where he will become the man he's always aspired to be, someone who not only fights for himself, but also for those who have no voice. As Caleb walks to his desk, his mind continues to race. He reflects on the case that changed everything, the moment he stood in that courtroom and took control of his own fate. But now, as a law student, he knows the real work has just begun. The fight for justice is never over, and there will always be more people to help, more wrongs to right. Suddenly, his phone buzzes, breaking his reverie. He glances at the screen to find a message from his professor, a potential first case. The excitement surges within him as he reads, "We have a case for you, a man wrongfully convicted and seeking justice. It's a chance for you to make your mark." The weight of the moment doesn't hit him all at once. It's a quiet realization, a feeling of purpose that settles in his chest. This case, this first challenge, is the moment Caleb has been preparing for. It's his opportunity to make a real difference. He responds quickly, his fingers tapping out the words without hesitation. "I'll take it." The decision is made. This case will be his first step toward his ultimate goal, a future where he not only defends the innocent, but changes the system itself. Caleb steps to the window, looking out over the horizon as the evening sky stretches out before him. The world beyond feels vast, filled with possibilities and uncertainties. But Caleb is no longer afraid. The path ahead may be difficult, but he's ready to face whatever comes. He takes a deep breath, knowing that this is just the beginning. The journey for justice is a long one, but Caleb Moore is ready to take it. Caleb stood in the doorway of his new office, looking out at the world beyond with a quiet resolve. The years of struggle, of fighting against the system that had tried to silence him, had led him here, to a place where he could finally begin his real work. The weight of the past had faded, but the lessons he learned along the way would remain with him forever. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. Justice isn't something you win once, it's a lifelong pursuit. Caleb had understood the truth of her words more deeply than ever before. His journey wasn't just about winning one case or proving one point. It was about the continuous fight for what was right, for what was fair. It was about standing up, not just for himself, but for all those who couldn't speak for themselves. And so, with a steady heart and a clear mind, Caleb took his first step into the future. There would be more battles ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But as he walked toward his future, he knew this was just the beginning.